China's remarkable transformation.
The rivalry between the world's two biggest economies is rarely out of the headlines.
The contest between the United States and China to be number one global superpower.
Number one global superpower.
A global survey of nearly 26,000 people across 21 countries just delivered a geopolitical plot twist. The leader who promised to make America great again may be making China look stronger instead. Majorities in almost every region now expect China's influence to grow over the next decade. 83% in South Africa, 72% in Brazil, 63% in Turkey, and even 54% in the United States. It's almost textbook. The more the US insists America first, the more the world calculates, well, China's predictable, so why not? In Europe, more than half say the same. Not a single country surveyed believes American power will increase. This is not about tanks, missiles, or GDP. The United States remains rich, military dominant, and globally present. The shift is psychological. In global politics, power is no longer just what you have. It is who others choose. That is the paradox. Donald Trump set out to restore American primacy, but in global public opinion, he is accelerating a transition toward a world where China looks like the safer bet and the West looks divided. So here is a question. If influence depends on trust and partnerships, which country is actually winning the future? Share your thoughts below. And before we continue, hit that like button, subscribe and share this video, because what comes next explains why America's new strategy may be writing China's success story. Under America First, the very tools that were supposed to strengthen the United States are driving others closer to China. Alliances have always been Washington's main advantage. Partner countries trusted that the US would defend shared interests and maintain open markets. But tariffs on allies, public pressure on Europe, and transactional diplomacy have shaken that trust.
According to a recent Pew survey, 62% of Europeans now say the US is less reliable as a partner than it was 5 years ago. In Asia, similar patterns appear. Countries like South Korea and Japan are quietly hedging, investing in China while keeping US ties. The logic is simple. When states no longer feel bound to a US-led system, they diversify. They don't need to choose China over the US outright. They just make Beijing the default alternative for trade, technology, and infrastructure. China's Belt and Road projects, growing tech exports, and supply chain dominance make this easy. By contrast, the US risks being seen as unpredictable and transactional, a partner to be hedged rather than followed.
So in practice, America First has strengthened China's global position without Beijing ever firing a shot. Across the world, public opinion isn't just shifting, it's reflecting real economic trends.
China ended 2025 with a record trade surplus of around 1.2 trillion, its largest ever, driven by exports to markets beyond the United States even as tariffs rose. Meanwhile, China's economy still managed about 5% annual growth in 2025, signaling resilience despite rising trade barriers. In contrast, uncertainties tied to trade tensions and tariffs have weighed on the U.S. economy, and forecasts show slower expansion compared with past trends, even as estimates vary. This kind of volatility can weaken confidence in U.S. economic leadership and influence. What this means is simple. China's ability to keep exports booming and post a historic surplus reinforces its image as a stable economic partner. At the same time, unpredictable U.S. trade policy, such as steep tariffs and slower momentum in export-led sectors, make some countries less certain about relying on Washington for long-term economic cooperation.
That's why in countries from South Africa to Brazil and Turkey, more people now see China as a necessary partner, while trust in America's economic leadership is flat or declining. Across the globe, people increasingly reject the old Cold War idea that the world must be split into two opposing camps. According to the ECFR Oxford Global Survey, majorities in countries like Brazil, South Africa, Turkey, and India think it's realistically possible for their nations to maintain good relations with both Washington and Beijing, without choosing one over the other.
This reflects a deeper shift. Power today isn't just about blocks, it's about options. That shift structurally favors China. Beijing's approach, economic engagement without formal alliance obligations, gives countries flexibility. China's trade network is massive. It is the world's largest exporter and a top trading partner for over 120 countries. Its infrastructure initiatives and supply chain integration create economic ties that don't require political alignment. In contrast, U.S. alliances often come with security expectations and ideological strings attached. In a world where states want freedom of choice and fewer binding commitments, China's model looks less demanding and more adaptable.
This creates a multipolar order that feels comfortable with China-first economic reality, not because China dominates ideologically, but because its system allows partners to pursue their own interests without enforced loyalty. Under Trump's return to power, Europe has emerged as perhaps the biggest strategic casualty in global geopolitics.
In a 2025 poll of European Union countries, only 16% of Europeans now consider the United States an ally, while 20% view it as a rival or even an enemy, a dramatic decline in trust compared with just a few years ago. This shift has real consequences. Support for increased defense spending now exceeds 50% across Europe, and substantial minorities even back mandatory conscription and a European nuclear deterrent to guard against future threats. At the same time, Europeans remain deeply uncertain about their own power on the world stage. Most doubt the EU could negotiate on equal terms with either the US or China, and deep pessimism about the continent's future remains widespread. Paradoxically, this has expanded Europe's appeal in Beijing's strategic calculations. China increasingly sees the EU not as a junior partner to the United States, but as an independent pole with its own interests. That matters because it weakens the old Western alliance system without any direct confrontation. The West appears fragmented, and China benefits.
In this emerging multipolar world, Europe's drift from the US and Europe's own insecurity creates space for Beijing's influence to grow. Under Trump's renewed America First approach, the old global alignment map is shifting fast.
In Russia, surveys show about 60% of citizens now view Europe as the main adversary, while fewer than 30% see the United States that way, a striking reversal from Cold War-era perceptions. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, confidence in Washington is stagnating, while more than half of Ukrainians increasingly look to Brussels and EU institutions for economic and political support. This reshaping weakens traditional bloc thinking. Alliances are no longer automatic. Regional influence matters more than rigid superpower loyalties. Central and Eastern Europe, once a buffer aligned firmly with the US, now hedges between Washington and Beijing, depending on trade and security incentives. For China, this is a quiet win. By fostering uncertainty and avoiding direct confrontation, Beijing benefits from a multipolar system, where US-led coalitions are diluted and countries must engage pragmatically rather than ideologically.
The global chessboard is now far more fluid, and influence increasingly follows opportunity rather than alliance. Trump is not making China stronger on purpose. What he is doing is redefining the United States as a transactional power, interested in deals, tariffs, and short-term gains, rather than the leader of the system. That shift weakens the ideological bonds that once held the West together and makes alliances more fragile. In this environment, China's model, state-led industry, patient investment, and a we-don't-interfere diplomacy fits the preferences of many emerging powers. Countries can get trade, technology, and infrastructure support from Beijing without political strings attached. The US still has wealth, military power, and innovation, but influence now depends on trust, predictability, and partnership. So here is a real question for you. In a world where power is about who others choose to work with, is China already winning, or can America still set the rules? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and share this video so you won't miss our upcoming content. Catch you in the next one.